If you want to learn how to play guitar well, and especially if you're doing it online without a teacher to keep a close eye on things, you need to learn good practice habits. Here are my 5 rules for practicing effectively. Watch yourself. The slower you go, the faster you'll get there. Mistakes are warning signs. Keep things simple. And repeat until you've really got it. Now, when I teach my students one-on-one, I spend a lot of time teaching them how to practice. I'll watch them practice on their own for a couple minutes, and then I'll tell them what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong. Now, obviously, I can't do that for you here. And so when you stop the video and pick up your guitar, you become your own teacher. So you need to be aware of how you're practicing as you're practicing. It's like there are 2 versions of you. One of them sitting there working on the guitar. The other one's looking over your shoulder thinking, am I going about this the right way? Now really, any good guitarist will have this habit, but it's especially important that you step up because there's no one else around to help you get back on course if you veer from the path. Unfortunately, I speak from personal experience here. For the first 15 years of my guitar playing career, I was mostly self-taught. I just used guitar magazines and I'd listen to my favorite recordings and try to imitate what I heard. It wasn't until I started gigging as an adult that I learned how to practice effectively. So back in high school, I'd be hunched over my tape player listening to a song like The Ocean by Led Zeppelin, and I'd try that damn main riff over and over again at full speed. And it was a total mess, but I figured that if I just kept working at it, eventually I'd wear off the rough edges and the riff would sound perfect. I wish I'd just stepped back for a moment and thought, maybe I shouldn't be practicing this riff at full speed. Maybe I should practice it slowly. If I'd done that, I would have avoided learning a lot of bad habits that I had to get rid of later on. Instead of trial and error, your goal should be to avoid error if at all possible. That's because you're trying to build muscle memory. Muscle memory is the ability to do complex movements without really thinking about them. It's the way people jog and talk, for example. Jogging is a complex movement, but we do it enough as little kids to where we can do it without thinking about it. To build muscle memory, you've got to repeat a movement over and over and over again until the muscle memory can just kind of kick in and do it more or less automatically. The problem is, when you're building muscle memory, your brain records correct movements and also mistakes. It's kind of like a long exposure photograph where as long as everything is totally still in the picture frame, the picture will still come out clearly. But if you're making mistakes 50% of the time, or 20%, or even 10%, that long exposure photo is going to be blurry, right? In the same way, if you make mistakes that often when you're practicing, your muscle memory is going to get this jumbled, blurry image of what you're supposed to do. It's going to be a mess. So when you make a mistake when you're practicing, there should be like this alarm that should go off in your head. There should be this red light flashing saying, wait, stop. What should you do differently to avoid making that mistake in the future? Now, sometimes all you need to do is just pay more attention to what you're doing, but more often you should slow down in order to avoid that mistake. So don't just blow by your mistakes. Your mistakes should make you pause and think, how should I change things? Keep things simple. Inexperienced students typically tackle a challenging piece of music by trying the whole thing from start to finish. Now, this might be a good idea if you want to see what you're up against, but once you start building muscle memory, start repeating things over and over, you should choose just a small, manageable piece of music, maybe just a couple notes at a time. And once you get that little piece down, then you can add on a few more notes to the ones you already learned. Now, keeping things simple can also mean separating 2 difficult skills that you need to perform simultaneously. For example, let's say you're working on Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison, and the chords are new to you, and the strumming pattern's new to you. So how do you work on these 2 difficult skills at the same time, learning these new chord shapes with your fretting hand while also learning a difficult strumming pattern? Well, the answer is you can't. Despite the vehement claims of 99% of high school students who insist that they can watch TV and do their homework at the same time, the human brain cannot multitask. The best it can do is just quickly switch back and forth between the two different tasks, although usually both tasks suffer, right? The homework is shoddy and you miss half the TV program. So instead, with Brown Eyed Girl, what you do is work on each skill separately. Work on fretting the chords by like just strumming once per chord to see if it sounds good. And then separately, work on the strumming pattern by just muting the strings or fretting an easy chord and work on it that way so you can put all your focus into your strumming arm and pretty much ignore your left hand or your fretting hand. Then once you've got the two skills down, then you can try bringing them together and so forth. Finally, repeat until you've really got it. Most people don't repeat things enough to really get it into their muscle memory. And this lesson was driven home to me by a lesson I took many years ago with a local guitar teacher here, Jay Roberts, who taught me that it takes between 20 and 80 repetitions, that's correct repetitions, in a row with no mistakes to really build good muscle memory. What he'd do is set an egg timer for like 4 minutes, and he'd tell me to do 80 repetitions of a phrase that I was working on with no mistakes. If I made a mistake, I should slow down or do something else to make it easier and then start from one again. And this lesson really taught me the importance of not making mistakes when you're building muscle memory. And I've used that technique now, and it's really sped up my learning. I learn difficult phrases a lot more quickly now using that technique. Now, whether it takes you 20 or 80 repetitions to learn something has to do with your natural aptitude and your skill level. Eddie Van Halen is probably in the 20s category. You and I might be closer to the 80s club, but hey, go 80s. Now I should make a little disclaimer here before I finish that learning rhythms is an exception to the rules that I've just laid out. It is helpful to slow down and simplify often when you're learning rhythms, but rhythm also involves this mysterious process of getting into the groove where you need to loosen up, stop worrying about sounding bad, and just try to feel the music. So don't worry too much about making mistakes when you're first trying to learn like a new strum pattern. Once you get it down, you'll have plenty of time to obliterate the mistakes from your muscle memory as you repeat the correct movement over and over again. Okay, to wrap up this lesson on learning how to practice, I just want to leave you with a little thing to remember as you practice that might be easier to remember than these 5 rules. Really, all you need to remember is that you have 2 tools in your toolbox when you're working on a difficult piece of music. Slow down and simplify. Slowing down should always be a tool you use when you're learning difficult music. And then simplify means just keep things really short, like just work on a couple notes at a time, or isolate difficult skills so that you're not doing 2 hard things at once. So 2 tools in your toolbox: slow down and simplify. All right, go have fun practicing.